The CEO's deaf daughter stood alone in the middle of a crowded charity gala, surrounded by hundreds of people who could hear every word except the one person she desperately needed to hear from. She watched mouths move, glasses clink, and executives laugh, but nobody noticed that tears were silently sliding down her cheeks. Then a single father walked through the doors carrying a toolbox, looked directly at her, and raised his hands. He signed one simple word, "Hello." The little girl froze. Her eyes widened. Then she ran toward him so quickly that her mother nearly dropped the phone in her hand. What nobody in that room knew was that the quiet maintenance worker had once been a Navy SEAL, and the reason he knew sign language was connected to the darkest secret of his life. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps our family bring more stories of courage, compassion, and hope to our community. The girl's name was Wren Calloway, and she was 8 years old. Her mother, Genevieve Calloway, was the founder and CEO of a global medical technology company worth billions. Genevieve could negotiate million-dollar contracts without blinking, command a boardroom filled with powerful executives, and solve business crises before most people realized they existed. But none of her intelligence or wealth had prepared her for the helplessness she felt when her daughter was born deaf. Wren had grown up surrounded by love, but also by adults who constantly tried to speak for her. Therapists explained what she needed. Teachers explained what she understood. Assistants explained what she wanted. Even relatives often looked at Genevieve before looking at Wren, as though the child herself wasn't capable of answering. Genevieve had hired specialists and tutors, enrolled Wren in an excellent school, and learned enough sign language to communicate with her daughter. But the demands of running her company meant she was often away. She told herself she was building a future for Wren, and perhaps she was. Yet somewhere along the way, Wren began learning an unfortunate lesson: adults were always too busy to slow down for her. The charity gala was being held at a grand daytime event center overlooking a lake. Genevieve had brought Wren because the foundation was donating millions toward programs for children with hearing disabilities. Genevieve wanted her daughter to see the event as something positive. Instead, Wren stood near a wall while adults moved around her. Nobody intentionally ignored her. That was the problem. People were simply too busy. A politician smiled at Genevieve and immediately began discussing business. A wealthy donor shook her hand. A television crew asked for an interview. Assistants hurried from table to table. Wren watched everything through the strange silence she had lived with since birth. Then she noticed someone different. A man near the service entrance was repairing a damaged cabinet. His name was Nolan Mercer. He was 37 years old, a single father, and worked as a maintenance technician for the event center. He had a 12-year-old daughter named Tessa and lived in a modest apartment across town. Nolan looked ordinary. His clothes were worn. His boots were scratched. His toolbox was old. But there was something about the way he moved that wasn't ordinary. He always knew where the exits were. He noticed every unfamiliar sound. He watched people's hands. He never stood with his back completely exposed. Those habits came from another life. Before becoming a maintenance worker, Nolan had been a Navy SEAL. He had served overseas, survived dangerous missions, and lost people he loved. But unlike many veterans who returned home speaking proudly about their service, Nolan rarely mentioned his military years. He had one reason. His younger brother, Adrian, had been deaf. Adrian had grown up struggling to communicate with people who refused to learn how. When Nolan joined the Navy, Adrian was one of the few people who made him promise to come home. Nolan had learned American Sign Language because of him. But Adrian never saw Nolan return. He died from an illness while Nolan was deployed. Nolan had carried the guilt ever since. He believed he had abandoned the person who needed him most. After leaving the military, he became a single father and promised himself that his daughter would never feel as invisible as Adrian once had. That was why he noticed Ren. He saw the little girl standing alone. He saw her looking at moving mouths. He saw her trying to understand conversations she couldn't hear. And he recognized the expression immediately. It was the expression of someone surrounded by people but completely alone. Nolan slowly approached. He stopped several feet away. Then he raised his hands. He signed one word. Hello. Ren froze. Her eyes widened. She looked behind herself as if wondering whether he was communicating with someone else. Nolan signed it again. Hello. Ren's face changed. The sadness disappeared. She ran. Genevieve turned just in time to see her daughter cross the room and throw her arms around Nolan. The entire area seemed to stop. Nolan gently placed a hand on Ren's shoulder. Genevieve stared at him. She had never seen her daughter approach a stranger like that. Nolan signed slowly, asking Ren whether she was okay. Ren nodded. Then she began signing rapidly. Nolan understood. She was telling him that everyone was talking and nobody was talking to her. Genevieve felt a painful realization settle over her. Her daughter had been lonely. Not because nobody loved her. Because too few people had learned how to reach her. Genevieve thanked Nolan, but she was visibly shaken. She asked how he knew sign language. Nolan simply explained that someone he loved had been deaf. He did not mention Adrian's death. Not yet. The next day, Genevieve asked the event center manager for Nolan's contact information. She wanted to offer him a better position within her foundation. Nolan declined. He didn't want money. He didn't want recognition. He only wanted to know that Ren would have people around her who communicated with her instead of talking around her. Genevieve respected that. She offered him a temporary position helping design accessibility programs for the foundation. This time, he accepted. Nolan began spending several afternoons each week working with Ren and other deaf children. Something remarkable happened. Ren became more confident. She began teaching other children signs. She started volunteering at activities. She stopped waiting for adults to interpret her feelings. For the first time, people were looking at her instead of looking past her. Genevieve watched from a distance. She was proud. But she also felt guilty. One afternoon, she asked Nolan whether he thought she had failed her daughter. Nolan refused to answer immediately. He explained that parents could love their children deeply and still misunderstand what they needed. Genevieve admitted that she had spent years trying to build the perfect life for Ren without realizing that Ren didn't need perfection. She needed presence. Nolan understood. He had made a similar mistake with Tessa. After returning from military service, he became obsessed with protecting his daughter. He checked everything. He controlled everything. He was always preparing for disaster. Tessa eventually told him that she didn't need a guard. She needed a father. The realization had forced Nolan to confront how much of his military mindset he had brought into civilian life. He was constantly preparing for threats that no longer existed. Then an unexpected problem threatened everything. Genevieve's board discovered Nolan's military background. Some directors became uncomfortable. They questioned why a former Navy SEAL with a traumatic service history was working around children. They demanded that Genevieve remove him. Genevieve hesitated. She trusted Nolan. But she also understood the responsibility she carried. Nolan offered to resign. He didn't want to become a problem for Ren. He prepared to leave the foundation without making a scene. Ren saw him packing his toolbox. She understood immediately. She became upset. She signed that everyone always left. Nolan knelt beside her. He signed that leaving didn't mean forgetting. Ren shook her head. She didn't want another goodbye. Genevieve watched the exchange with tears in her eyes. Then she made a decision. She refused to let fear erase the man who had given her daughter something money could never buy. She told the board that Nolan's past did not define his character, and that if they wanted to judge him, they should judge him by the way he treated the children in front of them. The board eventually backed down. But Nolan's past still remained unexplained. That changed when Tessa found an old photograph in his toolbox. It showed Nolan standing beside a young man. The man was Adrian. Tessa had known about her uncle but had never seen the photograph. She asked her father about him. Nolan finally told her the truth. Adrian had been deaf. He had taught Nolan sign language. He had always told Nolan that being unable to hear never meant being unable to understand. When Adrian became seriously ill, Nolan was deployed overseas. Nolan had tried to come home. He couldn't. Adrian died before he returned. For years, Nolan had believed that if he had been there, he could have saved him. Tessa finally understood why her father reacted so strongly when he saw Ren standing alone. He wasn't simply helping a deaf child. He was honoring the brother he couldn't save. The story reached a turning point during a daytime community festival organized by Genevieve's foundation. Hundreds of children attended. Ren was scheduled to participate in a small presentation. She had been practicing for weeks. But shortly before the presentation, a heavy display panel collapsed nearby. The sudden impact frightened several children. Ren became overwhelmed. People rushed toward her. Too many hands. Too many faces. Too much confusion. Genevieve tried to reach her. But Nolan moved first. He didn't grab Ren. He didn't shout. He simply stood where she could see him and began signing. Slowly. Calmly. The same signs Adrian had once used with him. Ren watched. Her breathing steadied. She raised her hands. She responded. Then she walked toward Nolan. Genevieve watched her daughter move through the fear instead of being swallowed by it. When Ren reached him, Nolan knelt and hugged her only after she opened her arms. Genevieve cried. Not because Ren was suddenly different. But because she was finally being understood. Later that afternoon, Genevieve approached Nolan. She thanked him. Then she told him that she finally understood something. She had spent years trying to give Ren a world where nobody could hurt her. But Nolan had taught her that the goal wasn't to create a world without pain. The goal was to create a world where Ren knew she belonged. Nolan admitted that Ren had changed him too. He had spent years believing his brother's death was a punishment he deserved to carry. But watching Ren grow had helped him understand that remembering someone didn't require living in guilt. Adrian had taught him sign language. Ren had taught him forgiveness. Tessa had taught him how to be a father again. And now Nolan was finally ready to stop running from the past. Genevieve expanded her foundation's accessibility programs nationwide. Nolan became the director of a new initiative dedicated to connecting deaf children with mentors who understood their experiences. He never used his Navy SEAL history to impress anyone. But he finally stopped hiding it. He understood that his military past was not a chain. It was simply one chapter in a much larger story. Tessa eventually became involved in the foundation too. Ren grew into a confident child who continued to communicate primarily through sign language while embracing every opportunity available to her. And Genevieve changed as well. She began leaving her phone behind during family meals. She attended Ren's school events. She learned more sign language. She stopped speaking for her daughter when Ren could speak for herself. Most importantly, she began listening with her eyes. Years later, the foundation opened its largest center yet. The building was named the Adrian Mercer Center for Deaf Children. Nolan stood outside with Tessa. Ren was beside Genevieve. The four of them watched children enter the building. Nolan looked at the sign above the doors and felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Peace. He realized Adrian's story had not ended with his death. It had continued through every child who learned that they were not invisible. Through every parent who learned to listen differently. Through every person who stopped treating disability as a barrier to human connection. And through the little girl who had once stood alone in a crowded room until one stranger raised his hands and signed a simple hello. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Before the story ends, leave a meaningful comment and tell us this: what is one small act of kindness that made you feel truly seen when you needed it most? Because sometimes kindness doesn't require money. It doesn't require power. It doesn't require a perfect speech. Sometimes it is simply learning how to say hello in a language someone else understands. Nolan had once believed his greatest failure was not being there when his brother needed him. But years later, he discovered that perhaps his brother had left him a purpose. A purpose that led him to Ren. A purpose that helped him become a better father. A purpose that taught Genevieve how to truly listen. And a purpose that gave countless children something they had been missing for far too long. The feeling of being seen. Ren had not needed a billionaire mother to buy her a louder voice. She needed people willing to listen to the voice she already had. And Nolan, the former Navy SEAL who had spent years carrying a secret nobody understood, became the man who finally showed her that silence was never the same thing as being unheard. Sometimes the most powerful hello is the one that says, without making a sound, I see you. I understand you. And you are not alone.